Hello, everybody, and welcome to the July 18th, 2018 edition of the Ephrom Josine Show. I am your host, Ephrom Josine. Now, let's talk about some news, why don't we? First off, this is something, it was shared by WikiLeaks, but this comes from the Times of Israel. In recording, Netanyahu boasts Israel convinced Trump to quit Iran nuclear deal. This was posted just yesterday. Public broadcaster airs clip of Prime Minister telling a Lucard activist U.S. exit came after he stood, quote, against the whole world by opposing accord. I can barely read the name for some reason. So yeah, remember this next time somebody calls Donald Trump a puppet for Putin. He's actually a puppet for Netanyahu, but they never tell you that part. The media has a huge pro-Israel bias, but not a pro-Russia bias. So they'll throw around Putin's puppet anytime Donald Trump sort of looks in the same direction as Putin. But when it comes to somebody like Netanyahu, who the media just loves, even though he's a neoconservative, and I thought we agreed by the end of the 2000s that neoconservatism is just an objectively bad idea. That's fine. Nobody cares. It's just sad. That's what it is. It's just sad that the mainstream media has fallen into the hands of people like that. Anyway, on Monday, we talked about a poll Roman Millennial did on Twitter that was specifically dedicated to the topic of abortion. Well, it turns out she made a video on it called The Truth about abortion and sex. I watched it last night. It's not very good. It's 17 minutes, and I won't cover every single point she makes because that would take way too long. Although she does make a lot of very bad points. But just look it up, The Truth About Abortion and Sex, and you can find it pretty easily. But before we do that, I'd like to tell you about a new app called... What's it called? I forget what it's called. The point is, they're giving me money, and I'm going to interrupt the video to inform you about them instead of putting it at the end like a normal person would. Because then you're more likely to just say, okay, I'll join, in the vague hope maybe I'll stop promoting it, but joke's on you, I'll never stop. The video starts out by talking about people like Tommy Lawrence, or however it's pronounced, and Michelle Wolf, who on a side note, I don't even find very funny, but have been kind of forced to defend, purely by the virtue of the fact that the right just absolutely hates her for making jokes. I know, they're a bunch of snowflakes. Anyway, however, Roaming's first point related to abortion is that it supposedly disproportionately affects Black, Hispanic, and poor women. This is just identity politics. And identity politics is normally... We talked about this yesterday with Live Act, and I even wrote an entire column on this. But it seems like when it comes to the pro-life movement, they can just do anything they want. They could probably get away with possible crimes when you think about it. But they can use any ideological point that they like, and people who are pro-choice sort of have to accept it. But okay, fine. Let's actually see what else she has to say. Roaming then complains that people like Michelle Wolf are making jokes about abortion. Yeah. It's kind of necessary to be a little bit shocking in order to be funny. That's something I thought you got, and that's why I thought people like you hated this politically correct humor. But I guess not. Good to know you're a hypocrite, Roaming. She then goes on to address the clumps of cells argument, which, on a side note, has anyone made recently? How's that? Because I hang out in tons of circles. A lot of people I know are pro-choice. I've never heard a single one of them use that phrase. Maybe you can find some people in the 80s or 90s using it, or maybe even early 2000s. But, consider this big one, We then heard your response to that point, and then adapted it as such to explain why we also still share those beliefs. We furthered the discussion, roaming. You still haven't. And are still relying on points I've never heard, at least. That's assuming someone actually has made it. If anyone, post in the comments if you've ever met a single person make that point, because I've, through the life of me, never heard it. As for the point that life begins at conception, no one is denying that. What we're denying is that particular version of life is not specifically, well, important. Let me explain. You see, a lot of things are alive, roaming. Bacteria is alive, for instance. Yet, washing your hands is not genocide. In fact, it is encouraged. Plants are alive. Yet, a lot of people eat salad. Animals are alive, and you made a very good, mind you, video about why you disagree with veganism, which specifically says, yeah, animals are alive, and as such, we shouldn't eat them. But wait a minute. You even mentioned in that video that pigs can be as intelligent as up to 3-year-old children. So, does that mean that if you eat pigs, you're okay with killing a 3-year-old child? If we're going for this all life is the same argument that I keep hearing pro-lifers make, you must believe that in order for you to be ideologically consistent. But, you know, roaming's a conservative, and ideological consistency is not really their strong suit. Roaming even calls our argument that no one has argued intellectually dishonest, which, may I just say, the bigger intellectual dishonesty, I'd think, is pretending people actually make a point they don't. It's the equivalent of me saying roaming millennial, for instance, is pro-life because a ghost told her to be. Now I just make her sound kind of crazy. That's not the case, for the record. I want to make that clear before someone says, you think ghosts are real, and they told roaming millennial to be pro-life, which, to be fair, I could see happening. How would that work out? Anyway, enough about my weird fantasies. She then addresses the point involving crisis pregnancy centers and just says pro-choice people hate them because they provide women with information. Ignoring that we actually hate it when they, for instance, open right next to an abortion clinic, lie about being an abortion clinic, they aren't, for the record, and then give false information. Oliver did a great segment over on Last Week Tonight about it, so I'll just ask you to watch that if you're interested. But there have been crisis pregnancy centers that actively lie about how long a woman has to get an abortion, specifically in the hopes that they run out the clock. I'm not making that up. Roaming then goes on to discuss the failures of birth control. And specifically how there are people who use it wrong and as such, well, fail at using it. Which I do agree with. I actually had a friend of mine show me stats that doing things like failing to properly air out a condom can actually increase the risk of pregnancy to, I think, about 10%. I will now show you every clip in the video where roaming advocates for instance, repealing of all laws that stop sex ed teachers from mentioning condoms or letting students use them in classes to understand how they work. And we're done. My favorite part, though, is when she goes after the birth control pill and says that the reason why it fails 9% of the time is because women sometimes don't take it. Yeah! That seems pretty obvious. Anyway, that's really the last point she makes, so that's all I'm going to cover. I am Ephrom, and good night.